Good evening, everyone. My name is Frank O'Brien, and welcome to the latest in a series of hearings regarding the comprehensive permit involving the premises located at 936 Brush Hill Road. My name is Frank O'Brien. I'll be chair of the board for this evening. Joining me are board members Nick Gray and Jeffrey Mullen. I see the applicant's attorney is here. Mr. Galvin is here as well. Folks, a couple of preliminary matters, if you will, and at first I'm going to take a little bit of the chair's prerogative and make some special opening remarks. As those of you who are participating in the hearing may know, last night there was a horrific motor vehicle accident in the vicinity of Blue Hill Avenue and Robin Street. Two people were critically injured, and a third, Mr. Michael McGrath, was killed. Mr. McGrath was well known to the board and participated actively in an earlier 40B case as an interested member of the public. We appreciated his candor and his interest throughout the process, and as they should be, our thoughts and prayers of the board and indeed the whole town with Mrs. McGrath and the entire McGrath family at this unbelievably difficult and tragic time for the McGrath family. So I thought that bore mentioning, and I thank you for your forbearance.
Thank you. Well said.
We have some scheduling challenges here this evening. I was notified just minutes before the start of the hearing that Mr. Reardon from Tetra Tech is unable to join us. And a happy occasion for the Reardon family. His son apparently has placed very high in the National Collegiate Skiing Championships, and he is in Lake Placid with his son, expectedly, if you will. So unfortunately, it appears that Mr. Reardon will not be able to join us this evening. We had intended to have a discussion regarding traffic and other issues. In that regard, I just want to note that since our last hearing on the 16th, the board has received two submissions, one on February 18th from Lori McIntosh. Ms. McIntosh is president of one of the neighborhood associations, and she submitted a fairly extensive email containing a number of comments and criticisms of the project. Her email is available on the town website for this project. Also filed with the board and dated March 2nd was an engineering and traffic peer review, again by Mr. Sean Reardon of Tetra Tech. And we will have to discuss that particular submission with Mr. Reardon at a later date. At this point in time, it looks as if Mr. Sawinski is going to be delayed. Mr. Schumer, what is the pleasure of the applicant relative to anything to go forward with this evening?
Good evening, Mr. O'Brien and members of the board, members of the public. If I may just very briefly echo your sentiments, well said, Mr. O'Brien. The shocking events last night, truly horrific, as you said. And I did reach out to Mr. Zawinski earlier today. As you know, my understanding is that the accident on Blue Hill Avenue took place very close to my client's property at 582 Blue Hill Avenue. And I don't know if there's anything that they can do or if there's any kind of security footage or anything like that. But I did make that offer to Mr. Zawinski that if there's anything we can do to help in the town's investigation, we'll of course do anything we can. And our thoughts and condolences go out to the families, as you said.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Thank you for saying so. We appreciate your offer and your words.
So with respect to tonight's hearing, Mr. O'Brien, based on Mr. Reardon's unavailability, is it the board's preference to go forward with the discussion of traffic, or would you prefer to hold off on that until Mr. Reardon can be present? We're prepared to go forward either way.
Let me take the sense of the members of the board. Mr. Gray, Mr. Mullen, do you have any preferences?
I think we should go forward. I think Mr. Reardon can review the tape. He can get caught up on the testimony and can offer his professional view.
All right. All right, Mr. Schomer.
Yeah.
Let's make use of the time.
Excellent, thank you. Just by way of one further update for the members, I wanted to make sure you were aware that on February 24th, we did have a meeting with Mr. Reardon and Mr. Bomer to go over their peer review comment letters. It was a fruitful and productive conversation, and they gave us a number of suggestions to take into consideration with respect to the layout on the site. And we're assessing those now, and we'll have updates for you hopefully by the next meeting in 3 weeks' time. In terms of tonight's proceedings, we are represented tonight by Dan Dumay of MDM Transportation, and I'd ask him to go through the traffic report that was prepared for the project, because based on the comments from Mr. Bomer and Mr. Reardon, the sense that we got from them was that they were comfortable in a general sense with the unit count and the general level of density of the project. So we felt it would be a productive use of the time tonight to go through the traffic generation and the project's general traffic impact on the neighborhood, because it's our expectation that the unit count is more or less settled, as it were, at least from our perspective. So Dan, if you wouldn't mind going ahead with your presentation into traffic, and just to make sure you're aware before I go on mute, Mr. O'Brien, I've unfortunately double booked myself tonight, so I expect that my other hearing tonight will start much later than this one ends, because I'm at the tail end of a very long and complicated agenda up on the Wakefield Zoning Board of Appeals. But in the unlikely event that I have to jump off of this meeting, I would turn it over to Joe Tamposi to stand in my shoes, such as they are. Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Schomer. Having been in that position myself yesterday in my professional life, we do the best we can. So thank you. Thank you for letting me know. And Mr. Tamposi, I'm sure you'll do a more than adequate job, though you won't be Mr. Schomer. So with that, Mr. Dumay, are you?
Yep. So through the chair, can I share my screen with everybody?
All right, Bev, can you make that happen, please?
It's already set up. It should be.
Okay. It should be loading now. So everybody should see the slides here.
Okay, we can see your slides.
So we have the slides here. Dan Dumay, Senior Project Manager with MDM. I'm going to give a little more detail in the kind of the same overall presentation that you guys saw for the opening night of this project, but we'll go into a little more detail and hopefully address some of the issues that come up at that meeting. Like you said, we had some peer review comments come back from Tetra Tech. Most of them in nature had to do with site plan issues, continue to work with the fire department. And we're not sure if the board's going to have a separate peer review for traffic, or if those are all the comments we'll get. I know for the other projects we had Jeff Dirk of Vanass had reviewed it, so we can discuss that after the presentation. So the study area here, we're on Brush Hill Road. So we look from Bradley Road, Dana Avenue, site driveway, and then Atherton Street to the south, kind of encompassing the main intersections and where the traffic would likely go for this project. We went out in pre-pandemic and counted traffic data out here. So it was before any of the real slowdowns in traffic. We collected daily traffic volumes just to the south of Cushing Road over a 24-hour period with speed data, which I'll go over. We also collected turning movement counts at each of these red dot intersections here between the hours of 7, 9 in the morning and 4 and 6 in the evening. Those are the peaks of the streets themselves. We collected the data in October. So we looked at seasonal adjustment factors, and it's an above average seasonal month. So we did not have to adjust the traffic down. And like I said, the counts had been done pre-pandemic. We looked at crash history of the intersections through Mass DOT's database for this particular project. We have 2014 through 2020, so pretty extensive research. 2 of the intersections, the Brush Hill Williams and Bradley intersection, and then the Dana Avenue, resulted in crashes. There's 4 total crashes, 3 and 1 respectively. 3 out of the 4 were single vehicle crashes next to the intersections. And then 1 of them occurred in the snow. So we ran what's called a crash rate. So it looks at the average number of crashes per year compared to the other intersections in the district. Those are up here. We're in Mass Highway District 6 within Milton. So it's 0.52 is the average crash rate for an unsignalized location, which these are. And we're below the average on those. We also looked up what's called a high crash clusters within the district, which would be the top 5% of the intersections within District 6. And none of these intersections are listed as high crash locations, which will be eligible for highway safety improvement funding through the state. And again, all below average crash rates. The traffic volumes, this is Brush Hill Road, again, just to the south of Cushing. It's around just under 1,800 vehicles per day. And then between 165 and 218 total volumes. That's 2-way traffic in front of the site during the peak hours. It's a pretty low volume roadway. Split slightly higher southbound in the morning and slightly higher northbound in the afternoon, right at that intersection, with the peak hours representing the 9 to 12% of the daily traffic. So it's a fairly low volume roadway compared to some of the other parkways, and Brush Hill Road to the north next to like Truman Parkway would be a lot higher of a volume road, for instance. As part of it, we collected speed data. So the regulatory posted speed limit out there, 30 miles per hour. We noticed that the average speeds were 31 to 33. In the 85th percentile, which is 85% of the traffic is traveling at or below these speeds of 36 and 38. So the speed data will be used to look at the sight lines for the intersection in terms of stopping sight distance and intersection sight distance to make sure that we have safety for sight lines at the driveways. So the first one's a stopping sight distance. So you may be aware it's an object 3.5 feet high, which is a driver's eye approaching the site driveway. So it's an object of the site driveway 2 feet high, represent a car at the curb line. So you can see we have the recommended for the regulatory in the 85th percentile. So in terms of safety, we want to meet this higher 85th percentile one. And looking northbound, we have around 400 feet, and southbound around 500 feet of sight distance looking at that intersection. So it meets the safety-based criteria for that intersection, for that higher travel speed of the vehicles on the road. The next one is the intersection sight distance. So in this case, it's an object 3.5 feet high. It's again that driver's eye going down the road. And then you're looking at an object 3.5 feet high, which represents the driver's eye of somebody leaving the site from 8 to 14.5 feet back from the roadway to make sure you can clearly see driver's eye to eye. And again, we have the AASHTO minimum criteria for the 85th percentile speed. So you want to make that safety-based criteria. So if somebody had to stop, they can. So we meet that criteria, and then we also meet the ideal sight distance for the posted speed limit which is a requirement. It's an ideal-based factor in terms of operations, so that somebody would, if you pulled out in front of them, would not have to slow down by more than 10% of their speed. So again, we have 360 feet looking to and from the south and 450 feet looking to and from the north. So we satisfy both of the higher ideal criteria for the intersection. Next, we looked at for 20 units out there, multifamily. We looked at low-rise units, and we looked at the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual. We came up with the number of trips that would be produced in the morning peak hour here, the evening peak hour here, and then over a daily basis. So without any reduction for transit or any other use in the area, we're going to produce, the project will produce approximately 9 vehicle trips in the morning, with the majority exiting. So 7 exiting, 2 entering, for a total of 9. And then the evening peak hours, this is the one peak 1 hour in the afternoon, we're looking at about 11 trips. The majority of the trips entering, 7, and then 4 trips exiting. In the course of the day, about 146 trips. That's split between half entering and half exiting trips over the course of a 24-hour period. This is based on industry standards across the United States, Canada, and they're very consistent with empirical data that we also have for apartments within the state of Massachusetts. We did look at what the area transit use was based on census data down here. And it's about 16% are non-auto use within this census tract. It's about 9% transit, 7% walk, bike, or work from home. And then there's an additional 7% that would be a carpool. But for the report, there was no credit taken for those trips. We think there could be some trips that will occur, but to be slightly conservative, we just assumed for analysis purposes, no credit. So next we looked at where these vehicles would go. In the morning, they're going to be going to work for the most of the trips, and in the afternoon, they're going to be coming home from work. So we looked at journey to work for the town of Milton based on census data that indicates where these people would go to work. It basically said about 65% are to and from the north, and then about 35% to and from the south. So this graphic here represents the peak hours. Again, the mornings on the left here. Our site is this intersection down in the middle, and then going south, Allerton, Curry Drive, Dana Hill Road, Bradley and Williams to the north. So you see the traffic is pretty well spread out, very reasonable two-way traffic numbers in these big arrows here, representing about 4 or less peak hour trips on kind of any one leg. About 6 total trips to the north and 3 trips to and from the south during the morning. And the opposite in the afternoon, we got about 8 trips to and from the north and 3 trips to and from the south. Really negligible trips on William Street to and from the south. There will be some trips through that road, negligible number of trips through Cushing Ave as well, maybe going over to the grocery store or over on Truman Ave. But during the peak hours, pretty negligible trips overall, very manageable within these study intersections. And then well below 5% increase in traffic for any major intersection here. So what does that mean in terms of operations? So we looked at level of service again at the 4 study intersections, the site driveway being the one on the bottom. We looked at a baseline condition 2021. And we looked 7 years in the future without the project in place. We had a background growth based on count station from Mass DOT. And then on our build condition, we add in the project on top of that to see the incremental impact between a no build, which is without the project, and a build condition 7 years into the future with the project. We looked at a V over C, which is the volume to capacity. So what's the volume of the road approach compared to what's the capacity of that approach? The delay in seconds, and then level of service, which is a letter grade A through F, with A being the best, F meaning more delay. So as you can see with this is the morning peak hour in this case. So going from a no build to build, there's no change in delay due to the noticeable delay due to the project. We're at level of service A, so it's very well operations, no real impacts in terms of traffic. Intersections work very well. The PM, very similar. We have a level service B here in the middle, but still very good level of service. No change from the conditions without the project in place. Site driveway is going to continue to work at level service A. Very low delay there. We saw the safety was fine. So next, we had discussions with the fire department, fire chief, sorry, after the preliminary hearing to get a little feedback. We're still going to go back and forth with him. But as you can see in this movement here, this is the largest ladder truck going into the site. It can stage up in this area and then it can back out and traverse out of the site. So we're kind of working with the fire department. He wanted to get 2 apparatus in there. He said the ladder will come in first and the pumper truck will come in second, probably over in this area in here. So they'll just have to get 1 apparatus out at a time. So a little bit of a staging. So we're going to continue to work with him. And in terms of access and egress of that vehicle, works pretty well. And similar with a single unit truck, this could be a garbage truck, refuse truck, or a moving truck, so that they can come into the site here. They can back up into this area here. We can work with the proponent on how they want to stage that truck for like moving. I'm assuming it's going to back in. It's going to stage somewhere over here out of the way. They can use these sidewalk systems to get stuff in and out. They'll be out of the way, and then they can traverse out of the site. This is a 30-foot box truck, so it's a fairly large vehicle. It's larger than your typical UPS or Amazon type of truck. It's a full 30-foot box truck. Again, adequate maneuvering in and out of the site here. Kind of a summary on the overall project. You have ample roadway capacity. As you saw, there's limited roadway impact in terms of the sight lines and the level of service. There's no real safety problem out there in terms of crash history at the intersections. We have a sidewalks on site that's going to connect the parking areas to the building entrances. Bike racks for residents and visitors. So I have some visitor bike racks outside, and I believe some interior secure bike racks, weather sheltered within the garage area. The driveway design has been designed to satisfy the safety criteria for intersection site distance, as well as single unit trucks and emergency deliveries. We have adequate sight lines for the SSD and ISD for not only the safety-based criteria, but also the operations ideal-based criteria. And then as part of the project, they'll maintain the sight line triangles for the driveways to maintain that adequate sight lines. That's kind of a quick overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board would have at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dumais. Let me open up the floor to my fellow board members. Mr. Graham, Mr. Mullen, any questions or comments?
Sure. Do you mind if I go first?
Please.
Can we go back to the auto turn analysis for the fire and the box truck, please? You've taken it off. Sorry.
I'll put it back up for you.
Yeah. To my eye, that looks extremely tight, right? I mean, I'm looking at what are the factors that go into determining whether that's appropriate spacing to allow the fire truck to get in? I mean, it looks like it would have to be absolutely perfect, ideal circumstance to get a truck in and out of there.
So the green lines here is the wheel tracks. The wheel tracks make it pretty easily. This blue line on the outside, which goes a little further, is the overhang of the ladder. So in the movement going in comes in this area in here.
So, I mean, it kind of looks to me that the blue lines are impinging on the spaces. Is that an appropriate design?
So it's adequate. They do not go within the spaces themselves. That's correct.
I mean, I have a really small screen, but it looks like it's basically tangent with the top of the line there. I mean, okay. So your testimony is that you believe this is adequate spacing to get the fire truck in and out of there.
That's correct.
All right, let's go to the box truck, please. So, I mean, really the same question. I mean, I look at that and it seems that this truck is coming perilously close to the spaces towards the end, the north end of that lot. And your testimony is that's an appropriate and adequate for the level of service necessary for this building, these buildings rather?
That's correct for the 20 units. Yep. So the line coming in would be a little thick line, but it's this line here.
Okay, does this take into account snow?
The
Snow removal, the placement of snow, how does
it would
that?
assume that the snow is not within the areas that it would need to use. So the snow would have to be removed.
So if the parking spaces are, I mean, obviously we haven't looked at how the snow is going to be removed from this lot yet, but if the snow were pushed into the space towards the curb, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm pointing at the screen, it's no
On
good.
this side,
Yeah, exactly. That's going to shorten the amount of space available for the car. And
yeah, so
that
it goes
would
along that.
interfere, it seems to me, with the truck.
So under that circumstance, you'd probably be correct. So they would need a snow removal plan to make sure the snow is either pushed into space that would not impede the movements of the vehicles in the fire truck, or it would be trucked off site. I'm not sure what the
Okay.
final plan is going to be.
Yep, I know it's early days yet. I'm just
But it's a
thinking
good
out
comment.
loud.
Yep.
I don't know. It just every project, the projects I've been involved with for 40B, what I would love to see is a dedicated spot to load and unload. To actually have a loading dock or some place where these vehicles can easily pull off and not have easier circulation and not, I don't know. So I understand that it may be physically possible based on this analysis for that size truck to make those turns. It just, at least to a layman's eyes, seems extremely cramped. So I guess I'll wait to hear what Mr. Reardon has to say about that. The last question I had is since I know that based on our site visit, that the amount of traffic that this project will or will not generate is going to be a major concern of the residents. Can you explain how the trip generator, what are the inputs into that? How do we I know we come up with the figures and the figures all show everything's going to be hunky-dory, but I'd like to understand better, like what goes into coming up with the calculation for the numbers you have on that page there for this particular project. How do we get those numbers?
So there are individual trip rates for multifamily units through the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They have a manual, and they have various sites throughout the United States. And you put in the number of units. So they would have gone out to actual facilities and counted them, and then estimated per unit what a rate would be. So we put in 20 units, and it would tell you the in, out, and the total number of trips for the morning peak hour, evening, or the daily.
So the number of units is the input here? That's
in this particular case, it's the number of units. So you could also use, if it was an office building or something, you could use per 1,000 square feet would be another generator.
Okay, so the number of parking spaces available is not a factor in determining those numbers?
That is correct.
Okay. Nor the number of beds in the facility, in terms of like maybe people have more than one car, for example. So it's purely 20 units. The units could be any size, but there are 20 units, and this is what the manual put together by the society says is the
correct. For some different land use categories, depending on the use, for some of the different residential ones, you could also get trip generation based on number of beds or bedrooms, and then you could also get it based on other factors. But for this particular one, we use the number of units. I'm not sure what the exact unit mix ratio, how many bedrooms per unit overall we have in this development, but in general, it's around 1.7 I believe beds per unit is the kind of the average for the IT users.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, thanks. I want to reiterate Mr. Gray's point about these deliveries. It seems to me there are going to be a lot of deliveries to a 20-unit building based on the way deliveries come and go these days. So I feel like there needs to be some more work done on that. That turning movement did not inspire me that was going to be a smooth operation. And I think you will hear from the neighbors that the numbers of Amazon and other delivery trucks in the neighborhood is pretty overwhelming. So that's my first point. I'm wondering on the ITE, the trip gen model, I wonder what's been done, and Dan, I don't know, you probably studied this pretty closely on post-pandemic adjustments to these peaks and what you're seeing, are we seeing the peak hours move, and I know these are relatively low volumes for the kinds of projects that people study closely, but what do we know about the post-pandemic world?
So there's no current data for ITE for post-pandemic. We do know in terms of the traffic volumes out on the road that the peaks are generally consistent with 7 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 6 in the evening still. The morning volumes are down anywhere between 10 and 30%, depending on where you are. They're actually probably down more closer to Boston and less in the suburbs, just because the amount of people that went back to the offices within the city. The afternoon traffic in general, in that 4 to 6 period, is probably down around 10% right now still. So what you're seeing is that in general, the one day of the week somebody would be kind of working at home type of thing is kind of the credit that we've seen.
Yeah.
So it has not come back in to what it was before, but there's no actual statistics out in terms of industry standards at this point. I'm sure they're going to come out with some, and they'll have to categorize those probably separately.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. On the parking. So I'd be interested in some type of comparison, same as. So for example, we've got 20 units, 3 beds, 2 beds, 1 beds. We've got X number of parking spaces. Here's a building that's like that works. I mean, you're assuming 100% auto dependent facility, even if people are walking, they're not walking to work. And there will be some stay-at-home people, but my sense is that most of these people are moving, and all of them, we have to assume that all of them are going to be moving by autos, even if you're going to encourage bike use and walk. I just think that's the reality of the site that we've got. But, and this, Dan, is not so much to you, or maybe it is. I mean, I'd be very interested in, we're experienced multi-housing developers. Here's the kind of buildings we're building, and here's what we're seeing in the field about how we can make it work. Because that will help us verify both the numbers of trips, but also the adequacy of the parking based upon this location. I'm also concerned, I mean, I know you're showing some people are taking transit, but there's nobody taking transit from this site that's not also getting in a car, because no one's walking to the T from here.
Yeah, we discussed it last time. It'd probably be, if anybody, it would most likely be a bicycle to the T.
Yeah, but they're not doing it. I mean, the bikers on Brush Hill Road are like Nick Gray and members of the Blue Hills biking club. That it just, and I look, I'm all over that. I think we're going to encourage you to have a nice, I think I said this in the last call. We need to get to the point where bike accommodation is not something else. It's built into the base design. That's what we're thinking. It is a project element, just like the dumpster. And there'll be some day when we will get there as opposed to saying, where are the bikes? Where's the bike storage? That's how this stuff works, I think. But don't mistake that for us thinking that somebody's going to get on a bicycle, ride up Brush Hill Road, and pop in the bike cage at Mattapan Square and hop on the trolley into town. That two people will do that. One of them's on this call, but no one else. So, but I'm interested in a real life example because I think that's the kind of thing that people will have a little bit more comfort level in. I'm concerned about the data given the moment that we're in, and we have no idea the elasticity or how that's going to respond. In fact, we may be seeing more trips, right? In the post-pandemic world, who knows? So anyway, that would be helpful, I think. The last comment is speed. I think I'm expecting the neighbors to say that they don't trust the speed data. That seems slow to me. I'm kind of glad to see it because I expected higher speeds. I'm wondering how that was measured.
It was done with a radar-based automatic traffic recorder. So the box that we use hooks onto a telephone pole, so it's pretty discreet. And it uses a radar to not only count the number of vehicles, but then the speeds of those individual vehicles. So every single 1,770 vehicles that we counted for the day would be a data point for speed, and it does it by direction.
How many days did you do the study, Dan? You probably said that and I missed it. I'm sorry.
I believe we have 24 hours of data, I believe. So one day.
Yeah. So, we
can take a look. Sometimes we do two, and then we report the speed data for all of the days, but the higher volume in the tables, higher volume day for the table.
Yeah.
But it'd be either 24 or 48.
Yeah. A note to the town. It might be helpful to. I don't know whether or not the town's put out any of their speed. The speed boxes that we have in the town. Might be interesting to see whether or not Brush Hill Road has been measured. I don't know personally. I know speed's been looked at, and Milton has expressed an interest in becoming a Vision Zero community. So speed town-wide is a big issue. And I think the board is interested in speed. I wondered, Dan, I know plow drivers and DPW officials aren't big fans of shelves and speed control on these kinds of roads, but I wonder if you have any experience with that kind of thing to control speed. A shelf,
It's sort of like a speed table or like a speed
table.
Speed hump. Generally it's mostly the ambulance and the fire department don't necessarily like them. Mostly the ambulance because they don't want somebody to get rocked up and down and slow them down from getting to somebody's call. Because I think the speed of them getting to a call is kind of the number one priority. But there's some other measures such as like speed radar devices, the driver feedback ones. It could tell you what the posted speed limit 30, and then below it would have the speed that you're actually traveling. So those can have some effect. There's some other measures like that. What we've seen, the biggest thing is you put up one of those radar devices and then you follow it up by occasional radar by the police. There's no real method that they could say like, oh, I didn't know how fast I was going because the thing 200 feet down the road told them. That seems to be pretty effective, but
my experience in Milton is enforcement sometimes is difficult just due to manpower.
Yeah, it's spread out through the town, so everybody would want the cops in front of their house a couple times a week to slow everybody down, I'm sure.
Well, the volumes are low, relatively low compared to some of our higher volume roads like 28 or 138 or Brook Road. There are no sidewalks, and there are a fair bit of pedestrians. Certainly everybody who lives in this neighborhood, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people who live in this neighborhood do walk, and just for exercise or whatever. So I think we'll have to return to the speed issue, but I'm interested in whether or not there are speed mechanisms that can be used to try to help that issue. That's all my questions for now, Mr. O'Brien.
We'll put some more thought into potential types of solutions that may be viable for that area.
Yeah, I'm interested in your professional judgment as well. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Mr. Dumay, I have a couple of questions myself. If you wouldn't mind putting the fire truck slide back up again, please.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm going to associate myself with Mr. Gray's remarks. This just looks awfully tight to me as an interested observer, and I will give the firefighters of this community their due in terms of apparatus placement and driving, but it almost looks pretty perfect. And if you've got a snow situation, or you have a vehicle in one of those earlier spaces that is not parked perfectly, or perhaps larger than normal, then you've got it would seem to me that you have a potential situation there that could make it more difficult for a fire truck to access that. I assume those spaces at the end are similar in size to the spaces throughout that particular area. I know that there was some conversation about compact spaces, and maybe the compact spaces were located in the parking structure.
Correct, yes. The compact spaces are all within the garage. All of the exterior spaces are full standard size spaces.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tamposi. Also, I don't see it, and sometimes I do suffer from O'Brien's disease, and that is the inability to see things directly in front of my face. But does this particular diagram note the placement of the dumpster, the trash receptacle, in terms
This one
of
doesn't.
the?
It should be in this area right here. Dumpster should be approximately right there.
Okay. For some reason, I thought the dumpster was up at the top in the driveway area.
I'll defer to Joe if it's been moved. As far as I know, it's down in this area here.
Right. I think we may be showing it. If you see where the the truck turnaround is, that it stops. Probably, I don't know how this is scaled, but that might be 10 feet away from the edge of the pavement. So where the truck turnaround is, that's I believe where the most recent dumpster location is being shown. No, so yeah, further to the right and then up, yeah, there.
This one? Or up here?
Up there, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I would assume that if there are vehicles that are illegally parked in the driveway, that would add to the degree of difficulty for access for larger vehicles into the parking area. Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
Okay, thank you. I'll also join with Mr. Mullen, join with Jeff in the sense that I'm surprised at the speed data. Frankly, everyone's an expert when it comes to speed. Everybody has their own perception of that, and so you noted that it was speed was measured on a day, and it was through a radar device. How often is that radar device calibrated, and can we rely upon that device? It's just like a little information about the mechanics of how it gets done, if you will.
So through routine maintenance, it gets calibrated. It's not like every single time that we go out.
And it's situated on on a telephone pole, or is it a freestanding device, or what?
This device gets mounted on, it can be on different poles, we usually put it on a telephone pole, just due to the size of the pole is good for the box, and they're usually located a good distance away from the edge of the pavement to give you a good reading of the vehicles.
Okay. My limited experience in dealing with you folks in the traffic engineering world is that you have standards for everything. Are there standards for the placement of speed measuring devices?
There's standards for how to collect the data through different methods, and then a statistical significance of how many data points you get. So, but in terms of there's no one set way to set up the radar device in an exact distance from the road in a set angle, if that's the question.
Well, I want to get comfortable with the mechanics. I'm not suggesting that there's anything untoward going on. It would seem to me that if the device is calibrated on a regular basis, you can rely on it. And if it is set up appropriately and correctly, you can rely on it. And I'm not suggesting that it wasn't calibrated or that it wasn't set up correctly. I just interested in how you would go about doing that, and what the standards, what the standard practice, what your standard operating procedure for setting up the device and running it. I was a little surprised to hear that it was set up for a single day. Is that standard operating practice as well?
Yeah, so the amount of data through for speed data through a 24-hour period would be statistically significant, yes.
Okay. And that, again, that's standard operating practice. Just do it for a day. You get enough data so it's statistically significant, and you move on.
Yeah. So for the speed data to be significant, if you need a real high accuracy for the daily volume counts, we'd probably leave it out for a longer period of time. But the daily volumes of 17, if it ended up being 2,200 vehicles on the road, it wouldn't make a difference in terms of what our traffic study was showing.
Okay. This is a road that has no sidewalks on it. And so that's an obvious safety concern. I'm not sure if this is even a valid question, but I'll ask it anyway. Are the volumes on this road that you've seen similar to the type of volumes you may have seen in other towns or in Milton for a road without sidewalks?
There are plenty of roads, around 2,000 vehicles per day, that don't have sidewalks. Like within town and other towns, if that's what you're asking. There's also plenty of towns with that volume lowering, like Cushing Avenue across the street does have sidewalks on most of it. That's a much lower volume roadway. Okay. And then you have like the Truman Parkway. Parts of the parkway don't have sidewalks, and parts of it do. That's a much higher volume road. I know part of the ZBA had seen the Ammer Road. That road is a similar, maybe even a slightly higher volume roadway, and there's no sidewalks on that road.
Okay. Thank you. Do any other members of the board have any additional questions?
No,
Okay.
thanks.
I see that Mr. Sawinski has joined us, and I believe his hand is up. So I'm going to give Mr. Sawinski an opportunity to ask a question or make a statement. Tim, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Apologies for the lateness. I was double booked at a hearing at the select board. You'll be pleased to know that they voted to accept Woodlot Drive as a town way. I don't know if anyone was waiting for that breaking news. I just wanted to know, and not having heard Mr. Mullen's comments earlier, and Mr. O'Brien, you and him both remember the the Blue Hill Ave hearing, we were able to have the town's mobile radar speed detecting setup put up on Blue Hill Ave to kind of corroborate the data that we had from that team. I think what we found was that data kind of matched up, but we can certainly check in with the DPW department to see if we've had one of those set up in the area of Brush Hill Road recently, and if not, I think we can inquire as to whether or not we want to set up, for a week or two, one of those signs again, just like we did for the Blue Hill Ave project.
Thank you, Mr. Sawinski. I see a number of nodding heads relative to that. So, thank you. Do you have anything else to add at this point, at this moment?
No. Again, apologies for being late. Sorry.
No problem. Mr. Schomer, glad to see you're still with us. Anything in addition you'd like to add at this point?
I don't think there's anything further from us tonight, Mr. O'Brien. As I mentioned before, we are taking into consideration the comments that were made during the working group session with Cliff Bomer and Sean Bearden. So we're throwing around some ideas in terms of site access, and your points are well taken, and we're looking into those issues now and how to improve the accessibility and make the site more accessible. So that's to come, I think.
Thank you. I see Mr. Tamposi has his hand up, so I will get to Mr. Tamposi in just a second. And then I will ask Mr. Galvin if he would like to provide any comments. But Mr. Well, there you are, Mr. Tamposi. My screen flashed all of a sudden, and you had your hand up, sir.
Yes. I just wanted to add, because as the board members were asking about the auto turn diagram. I recall from other projects that we've done that that diagram is based on a simulation, and it's not one precise movement that that's demonstrated by that line. That includes area for different turning motions run over a simulation period. That was my recollection from from prior times when this same question has come up, because I agree with the board members, looking at it on on the diagram, it looks like hey, they have to execute a perfect turn maneuver, but the lines that are shown there are actually take into account human variation over over various simulations.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Tamposi. And I do recall in prior hearings having extensive conversations or testimony and statements concerning auto turn analysis. And I now know more about the size of Milton's ladder truck than I care to know. So it is what it is. So we'll deal with it. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. It does look very tight, however, and I think that we'll have continuing discussions regarding emergency access to this site in general. So with that, Mr. Galvin, I would like to give you an opportunity to respond, address the board, what have you. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members of the board. So I wanted you to know that we have retained John Chesia, who will be assisting the abutters in the Brush Hill Neighborhood Association, and probably some that are also in the Cushing Hill Neighborhood Association, with some of their articulating some of their comments from an engineering perspective. Specifically on the issues that you're looking at tonight, I would certainly second the comments about the speed on the road. My clients who live on the road would certainly tell you that that 24-hour period is probably not representative of the speeds that they find people traveling on, particularly slightly further down the road. And when I mean slightly, there's a downhill area there, and 38 miles an hour, which is the 85th percentile speed, is probably something that no one travels when you go in, when you're heading in that direction. With respect to the issue of the fire trucks, just a slight point that's maybe a little differently. I looked at the Tetra Tech Rizzo report. Comment 38 calls the movement of the ladder truck impractical in circulation sequence that will be difficult, if not impossible, to perform during an actual response. And in the limited discussions that I've had with our peer review or our consultant, it doesn't reflect the fact that there'll typically be a police vehicle or one or more there. There'll typically be a second fire truck and an ambulance in a typical emergency situation. And with all the other things that could go wrong with people not parking properly in a space, it seems in fact impractical. I've raised this on other projects in Milton, and this is another project which is a problem for us, and because I think it'll result in loading that's going to take place in the street. Amazon trucks and the delivery trucks now park on the street. They don't come into developments, particularly in a development that they're not going to recognize as being multifamily. If you park along the street here, you're creating a real hazardous situation. Bringing the vehicles onto this site, I think, as a number of you already recognized, blocks somewhere between 3, 6, or 7 parking spaces. If it's a moving truck, it's not going to be there for 5 minutes. It's going to be there for significantly longer. Hopefully, a delivery truck wouldn't be there forever. But again, it's another project without any type of dedicated loading space. And all the environmental issues would certainly complicate it if snow removal doesn't take place on a continuing basis. And there really isn't any snow storage space on site. It looked also to us like the proposed dumpster area is also the area where some of the turning movements are contemplated. We also noted that as Mr. Reardon did, that there's no pedestrian access to the street. There's no area for someone to wait for a school bus if there's children in the development along the street. Those all affect everything. And although there are a lot of my clients that do walk in the neighborhood, a lot of them do not walk or walk very carefully on this section of Brush Hill Road because of the bends and the speed at which cars they view are traveling. I'm not a traffic engineer. These are the comments that I'm hearing from my clients. These are the things I think that anyone that's rational can even expect when you're going, when you walk out there and see this. We don't think people are going to bike or walk to the T station in this area, and it's a complete commuter facility here with these parking spaces. So those are our comments at this point on traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. Any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Galvin?
No questions. Thank you for the comments.
Okay,
No questions, thank you.
hearing none. Mr. Schomer, anything that you'd like to add following on to, or Mr. Dumay following on to Mr. Galvin's comments?
Yes, just one final point of clarification, if I may, regarding the location of the dumpster. And I believe that was changed in the most recent version of the site plan that was submitted to the board back in December, and that was after MDM prepared their auto turn analysis. And so I'll just confirm that the trash enclosure is located at the end, just beyond the fire access turnaround. So that doesn't affect otherwise the geometry of the site, other than the fact that when the trash collection vehicles would come in to the site to collect garbage, they would pull directly into that area and load garbage and would not have to access the remainder of the site other than to turn around if that was necessary. But I did want to clarify that since there was some confusion about where the dumpster was located.
Thank you, Mr. Schumer. Perhaps at some point you could note for the board the particular plan where that's on, because if that is, to my mind, just remembering it, it seemed to be intruding, if I could use that word, in the turnaround space for a larger vehicle. So,
Would you like me to put it up on screen, Mr. O'Brien? I do have it.
if you wouldn't mind.
Certainly. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Here, can you see this plan
Yes.
here?
Okay.
Okay, so the previous dumpster location was down here in this area of the site, and the most recent plan shows that the trash enclosure located here just beyond the fire access turnaround here. So the new proposal for for trash vehicle access is to come into the site and drive directly into here, front loading to pick up the trash and then back out of the site, or turn in this direction if that's needed, but more likely to back out of the site, I would expect.
So can you represent to the board that the auto turn analysis was done with the trash enclosure at this particular location?
The auto turn analysis was done prior to this, but what I will commit to do is ask MDM Transportation to run a new analysis and provide that to the board as soon as possible, showing the current trash enclosure location.
Thank you, Mr. Schomer. I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Certainly.
So,
Mr. O'Brien, can I ask a question on that point?
Mr. Gray,
So I understand the trash truck is going to front load, it's pick up the dumpster, dump it in its back, and then explain to me somebody explain to me, how does that safely back up out into the street?
For that one, I'm gonna lean on.
Yeah, I know it's not really a question to you, Mr. Schomer. I apologize, but I'm just curious, how does that work?
Yeah, Dan, if you wouldn't mind answering that question, I think if I'm the expert in the room on this, we're all in a lot of trouble.
Thank you.
Yeah, so under many circumstances, that it would come into a lot, front load, and then it'd have lights and stuff on the truck, so it'd simply back up. It'd have the backup alarm, and it could back out to the street and go out. Or in this case, most likely it could do the opposite of the fire truck and back up into like the parking area and turn around and go out head first.
Okay, so it could, in your view, it would be possible for it safely to back out all the way to the street.
As long as it had all the safety mechanisms on it, it occurs all the time. But we will run the auto turn on this updated trash enclosure location. And it might be preferable for them to turn around on site and go out head first if that's feasible.
Okay.
if I may, I would be a little leery of having a large trash truck backing down that driveway and sticking the back end of the trash truck blindly onto the highway. That just seems pretty risky to me. Mr. Mullen, you have your hand up, sir.
Well, I was going to say something to that same effect. I think, certainly interested in the ability of the fire truck, the largest fire truck, to do this maneuver. But what I see lacking in this plan is something I've heard from each of the board members and Mr. Galvin as well. I think we need a lot more thinking about the everyday delivery, which I think is going to come every hour, every day. And I'm much more anxious about the fact that this doesn't seem to reflect that. It's the same point Nick made, which is we need to do better. I mean, this is like an element of the way people live today. This is an element of site plan design, right? That's what's going to happen. So I feel like there's a lot more work that needs to be done on that piece of it, notwithstanding the fact that you've got to make the fire truck work, but we really need to focus on the trash truck that's going to be there every week, and as important, the Amazon truck that's going to be there every hour.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Mr. Schomer, anything else you'd like to add?
Nothing further. I'll go ahead and take down my screen share. And that was the plans that were filed, I believe, December 22nd, for your reference and for anyone who's interested in reviewing that plan. That's the architectural set.
Thank you, Mr. Schomer. I was just happy that I seem to remember it. So, all right. At this point in time, with Mr. Reardon being unavailable, Mr. Schomer, do you have anything else that you'd like to add at this particular point in time? Because if not, I think I'd like to open it up for comments from members of the public.
Nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin, anything that you'd like to add before I open it up to members of the public?
No, I mean, I will tell you, I know we have significant concerns over the density of the project and its complete use of the site, but I was kind of saving those until we had Mr. Cheshire's comments. So I just wanted you to know that that is a significant concern.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin, and thank you for mentioning that and letting us know that you and your clients have retained Mr. Cheshire. Do you have a timeline on Mr. Cheshire's work product? And I just asked that from a scheduling point of view.
I asked him today, but I also told him, and I told him, being unaware of the further peer review, that I was thinking that there might be some project changes. And I didn't want him to review the project if it was going to significantly change or substantively changed because of the cost and expense involved. I'm sure that if there aren't going to be any major site changes, and that's the end, would be ready in a couple of weeks at any time to provide our comments.
All right, that's fair. Thank you.
I'm sorry, just, I just
Sure,
want to pick up on that. I guess I was expecting site changes based on the last hearing and on the fact that Mr. Schumer said that they were working on the conversation they had with those. So I think that's where we are. If we're not, somebody should say that. Is that not right?
I think we're looking into it. We haven't committed at this point to make.
No, I didn't say you did, but you are working on it. So from Mr. Galvin's perspective, it does make sense. So he doesn't have to do the work twice.
Right.
I would say, and not to instruct Attorney Galvin or
No,
or
I
his
don't know who
consultant.
wants to, but it was a
My
good question.
suggestion to him would be that if Mr. Chesia has high level comments that he'd like to make, that those would be appropriate at any time. You know, project of this nature, as you and Mr. O'Brien are well aware, do change pretty frequently throughout this process. And
What I
I'll
recall
refrain
is
from using the phrase that
iterative,
we all hate.
iterative.
Yeah, you
That
said
was-
it, not me, Mr. Mullen.
You said it first.
Yeah.
Well, that's your word, Mr. Schumer. I have it tattooed on my arm. It's an iterative process. So
As do
thank
I.
you.
Yep.
Okay.
So I would say for Mr. Chesia's benefit, if he has remarks at this time that are relevant to the aspects of the project that are not under revision at this point, meaning the access arrangement, we're certainly willing to take a look at his review and speak with him and try to address his concerns.
I can tell you this, his comments are going to be focused on the stormwater design and constructability and the setbacks. So.
Okay, well, those areas I think are not currently under discussion for revision. So if he has remarks that are ready or will be ready within the next couple of weeks, I would say go ahead.
Okay. All right. At this point in time, Mr. Sawinski, do you have anything that you'd like to add at this particular point?
No, except maybe towards the end, if we can just kind of talk about, I know you're talking about scheduling. I just want to make sure we're all kind of clear on what the subject matter is. I know we've had a little bit of flip-flop based on Mr. Reardon's inability to attend. I'm dealing with this on the other hearings too, so I just want to make sure we're all very clear. So I'm sure we can do that at the end.
Okay. If I somehow forget, please remind me. All right, I think at this point in time, if there's no objections, I'd like to open it up for comments from interested citizens who may have been listening. Ms. Sutton, do we have any folks who have raised their hands and asked to be recognized?
We do. We have two right now. We have a C. Newman, who I'm allowing to talk. And I hope I did justice to your name.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Welcome, Mr. Newman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My name's Charles Newman. I live across the street from the proposed project. I just want to make sure Mr. Tambosi understands that my home and my guest house behind my home is available to his renters in the case of a fire, because the way the project is designed, there's no way the back part of that project can be protected from a fire perspective. Second, my wife and I, who are elderly, we probably leave our house once or twice a day by vehicle. And that kind of suspects that the rate of exit and entering of that property is somewhat biased, because only 2 people versus a property that's going to have over 20 units doesn't sum up to me.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. That the end of your remarks, sir?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for participating this evening. Beverly, do we have another person that is asked?
We do. Dwayne,
Yes.
wonderful. I got the name right.
Okay. Mr. Day, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and your address for the record. And
Sure.
then the floor would be yours. Go ahead, sir. You're on mute, sir.
I'm asking to unmute. He's having issues.
There we
How's
go.
that?
There we go.
Okay. Good
Okay.
evening, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dwayne Day. I reside at 53 Cushing Road with my lovely wife, and we have a great deal of concerns with this project. And if I could ask the gentleman, Mr. Dumais, to bring up that plan that he had posted earlier.
Could you be more specific? Or
The plot plan that has has both buildings, and particularly with the fire department and the box truck. Well, let's do the fire department diagram first.
all right, Mr. Dumais, if you wouldn't mind putting up that one. Is this the one you meant, sir?
That is the one I was hoping to have. Yes.
Okay,
Now,
proceed.
thank you. Now, I am a Boston firefighter, 32 years. I'm a fire lieutenant, and I'm in the Brighton area of Boston. And in our neighborhood, there's one project that's going up that looks like something that I've been a part of, I could say easily 50 fires over my career. And this diagram, this plan, this isn't going to work. I'm sorry. I have 32 years experience fighting fire. This is not going to work. The first arriving company to this complex from the town of Milton will be the engine at the top of Bradley and Blue Hill Avenue, Route 138, a single engine house. They're going to be the first ones in. We're not even talking about a ladder company. This is an engine company. When they arrive, they're the first due. They're going to start with sizing up, getting water to the seat of the fire. They do not have a ladder truck coming until the ladder company located behind Town Hall on Canton Avenue. So they're going to be there for a good 2 or 3 minutes by themselves. Now, the building in the rear, how many stories is a building in the rear of this project?
We'll call it 2.5 stories.
2.5 stories in the rear. And can we get an estimate of how deep that building is from the front of the building with the parking spaces?
You know what? Why don't we just we'll what would be your point in terms of that? I mean, let's I don't want to hold up your presentation until we get that number. It is gettable, but we would have to search through some of the
Okay,
documents. and
I was
whatnot.
hoping that somebody who's on this project, who's been touting this project and boasting
The
this
wait
project,
is unbelievable.
it's going to be huge. Now, my point is, you have cars in the front of that building, you have parking in front of the building, you don't have access to the rear of the building. If there's a fire in a unit at the rear of that building, you're not going to have access to the rear of that building at all. The ladder company that's first in is only 110 feet aerial ladder. To even throw that stick, that ladder that's atop that fire truck,
Great.
it has jacks on the sides of that apparatus to stabilize it in order to throw the stick to get to the roof. To throw that stick safely, you're going to need 40 to 50 feet because jacks come up from the side of the truck to stabilize it in order to safely throw the ladder. With all those cars, with the space for the parking spaces and everything else, there's no way you're going to be able to throw that ladder to that building safely on either one of them. It's just not going to happen. Plus, you're going to have the engine company, which is the first due, behind those cars in front of that building or in front of those cars to the other building. You're not going to be able to get the ladder truck in there to do work. Then if you said you were going to move the dumpster from its current location to over where there's a ladder truck at the end of the driveway, that's going to make it even more difficult to throw a ladder. Or even if a ladder company is there and you need an additional engine company, with the dumpster there, they're not even going to be able to turn into where the cars are parked. I'm sorry. I have 32 years experience at this and there's no way. I'm sorry. And at the same time, there's always multiple companies coming in. And if you have an apartment building in Boston, we have a running card, which suggests on a complex like this, you're gonna have 2 ladder companies and 3 engine companies and the chief, and you're gonna have the police and you're gonna have EMS. And at that stage in this game, because Milton being a town, a smaller town, you're gonna have mutual aid from the city of Boston. We're coming to help Milton on mutual aid. With Brush Hill Road and the size of this complex and the bottlenecking that's going to occur, if there's a fire in the back of that building, there's going to be a lot of damage. There could be loss of life. I'm glad we're talking about this. I'm glad we're talking about this now, because there's no way you're going to get to the back of that building. Imagine 2 o'clock in the morning, everybody's home, everybody's asleep, a fire breaks out. Nobody's going to know it until the alarms go off, and then people move slowly. They're afraid. It's dark. You lose power. There's smoke in the hallways. Now the fire trucks are coming. We don't know where the fire is. We have to find the seat of the fire. It's getting away from us, and now we're trying to get to the back of the building. It's not safe. I'm sorry. You look at the plans yourself. Look where the apparatus is placed. You have 4 fire trucks there. And they need to be at the rear of that building. They need to be closer to the rear of the building. And then it's a lot. But that's just the fire aspect of it. The parking aspect of it. You say how many cars are we talking about per unit?
There are 20 units here.
20 units. And we have parking for how many cars?
Mr. Schomer?
Look up that figure for you. It's my recollection is it's somewhere on the range of 1.8 per unit.
Okay, so we're talking multiple different size units. So we're talking less than we're talking 2 cars per unit. So if we have a 2-bedroom unit, we can actually say a family, husband and wife, that's 2 people. There's 2 people that reside at 53 Cushing Road, 2 people. We have 10 cars and we pay excise tax on all of them. They're all registered, they're all here. So to say that somebody's just gonna have 1.7 cars is an average, and that is something that we honestly can't sink our teeth into. And then where are they gonna park? Where's the overflow gonna go? When people have guests over, where are they gonna park? There's no sidewalks, there's no parking on Brush Hill Road. So they're gonna have overflow on Cushing Road. They are gonna park on Chuck's and Maureen's lawn. I don't know. This is a problem. The other thing is with the deliveries that we spoke on before. They will be double parking out on Brush Hill Road. I walk Brush Hill Road every morning and every evening. The cars that come around the corner, right over by the gate and the entrance of Curry College, are traveling faster than 33 to 35 miles an hour. They're traveling faster than that. I walk it all the time. My wife is unsettled about walking Brush Hill Road when it starts to get dark. There's not a lot of lighting out there. The cars come around the corners. It's not a straight road at all.
Oh,
And
he's
then there's, yeah, and then there's coyotes,
So,
and then there's,
Mr. Day, if I could interrupt you for something,
Sure.
for just a moment. Mr. Newman, if you wouldn't mind putting your microphone on mute, sir. Mr. Day has the floor. We would appreciate it. So, Mr. Day, go ahead.
okay. So with that, the deliveries, the trucks.
Mr. Day, unfortunately, your microphone was muted mid-sentence there.
How's
And
that?
now you're back.
Beautiful. I'm sorry about that. So
That's okay. And if you wouldn't mind, we probably have some other folks, if you wouldn't mind wrapping up your comments, sir.
okay, well, at the end of the day, the reality is there's a lot of problems that need to be addressed. And then it's, you know, the whole idea of 24 hours with the traffic. What day was this actually done on? I mean, is there a date that they were out there and actually did this? What day was that? Anyone?
Thank you, Mr. Day. I think, Mr. Dumay, it's probably a question I should have asked you specifically. What day of the week was the survey done?
Look it
I think I floated around it, but didn't ask the question.
up. The 24-hour count was done on a Wednesday. The turning movement counts at all the intersections were done on a Thursday.
Thank you.
Typically for a traffic study, outside of a weekend, a Saturday, for a residential project, it would be a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, or a normal standard weekday. We try not to count Mondays or Fridays because they're sometimes atypical.
Okay.
So if our ATR was on the Wednesday, then the turning movement counts, each of the study intersections was Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. Dumay.
And they, like I said, they were done in October,
All right.
which is slightly above average season if you look by month.
Thank you. Mr. Day, I think you have an answer there, and you can. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add at this point?
I just want to make sure that with the parking situations, with the fire situations, with the delivery situations, with the placement, even with the placement of the dumpsters to the neighbors that will be on the right of this property, close to their property line where they actually sit and relax in the back, there will be a dumpster. There will be a dumpster full of rubbish with 20 families. It's, I think there's a lot of problems here. And we're going to actually make sure that we be a significant part of this. And we thank you for the work that you've done. And we'll see you folks soon.
Thank you, Mr. Day, for your extensive and thoughtful comments, and thank you for your service to the citizens of the city of Boston as a firefighter. So I would ask that if you've concluded your remarks, if you wouldn't mind muting your microphone again. And then Ms. Sutton, do we have any other citizens who have asked to be recognized?
We do. B. O'Connell.
Good evening. My name's Bob O'Connell. I live at 923 Brush Hill Road, next to Chuck. I have a couple of follow-up questions on some questions that have been previously asked. Mr. O'Brien asked the day of the week. Could you also tell us what the weather conditions and road conditions were when you did your traffic study and your speed study? And if you don't have those, if you could get those first, it would be appreciated.
Why don't we get your questions out of the way, and we'll see what when we get all your questions out the table, and then we'll see what we can do in terms of some of them. So why don't you continue, Mr.
So question number 2 is going back to some earlier questions in regards to snow storage. We had a 22-inch storm here this year, and we have storms like that on multiple occasions in the last 10 years. If you look at the weather channels, they'll pick up the amount of storm that we've had. And all of the recent records have been set in the last 20 years. I'm very concerned with the snow storage, particularly with the width of the driveway, and that it appears that the driveway is pitched, coming up the drive to the left to the neighbor's yard, and they're going to be runoff, snow storage, and sheet flow onto the neighbor's property. So I'd like to have somebody look at that. On the last diagram that was put up by Mr. Schumer, it appeared that was the dumpster location was moved to the very rear of the straight-in shot, which would make sense for a front-load dumpster. Could we find out the yardage of the dumpster and the size of the fencing that will go around it? It also appeared in that drawing that their driveway ended and there was a curb. Yet the machine, the truck that has to pick it up is going to have to be on pavement or cause damage. And if it's paved right up to the front of that dumpster, you're going to have problems with illegal parking, which are going to complicate things if there were a fire or any other emergency situation. My fourth question is, I'm assuming that Chief Madden has reviewed or will be reviewing this plan. And my last question is basically the runoff from all of the area. And I'm assuming there will be a plan coming from the civil engineer that addresses all of that. And that's what I have for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. I can assure you that at some point in time, the board will either hear from or have communications from the fire chief. We tend to have a town night, if you will, town department night, where we hear from the public safety officials, the DPW, et cetera. So I think you can be assured about that. Runoff and other civil engineering issues, including snow storage, will be the subject of a hearing in and of itself, where those issues will be discussed. And I think that they will be discussed a number of times. So I would ask that you hold your questions until that particular point in time. In terms of the dumpster size, I know the location has been set. I don't recall if the dumpster size was specified. Mr. Schumer, perhaps you can enlighten me about that.
It has not been specified, to answer your question, Mr. O'Brien. Typically, it's done as a calculation based on the number of units. But what I will do in response to to the question is request that Embark Architecture provide further information on the sizing, the expected sizing for the trash enclosure for this location.
Thank you, Mr. Schomer. I recall an earlier hearing that we were involved in where the mechanics and the sizing of trash was of a significant, it generated a significant number of questions. And so perhaps we can put that on the to-do list to take care of that. In terms of your first question, the weather and road conditions, I'm not sure if Mr. Dumais is prepared to answer that question at this point with Mr. Schomer. Do you have information on the weather and road conditions, or Mr. Dumais, when the survey was done?
I'd have to look up that particular day, based on the history of Milton and the weather. But I do know if it was done during any event, like it was done outside of the snow period, it was done in October. But if it was done during that period, we wouldn't have used the count, we would have recounted. So it potentially was done either during clear weather or during rain, but there'd be no real adverse effect to the traffic. There was no out of the ordinary event.
Thank you.
I can look it up and hopefully find that for you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. All right. Mr. Sawinski, I see that your hand is up again.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Bryan. Just to address Mr. O'Connell's comment, we have had a preliminary meeting with Chief Madden and the development team. He did bring up a number of issues. A number of Mr. Day's comments were familiar to me because I heard Chief Madden make them. So he's provided some preliminary input. We will be keeping Chief Madden in the loop as the site plan iterates. The development team, I've been assured, has been taking his comments into account. If there are site plan changes, we'll want to make sure that, just as our peer reviewers are evaluating these things based on their expertise, that we keep Chief Madden, apprised of any site plan changes to make sure it works for his equipment and his responses. So that a preliminary meeting has taken place, and we'll continue that interaction and that evaluation as the project goes along.
Thank you, Mr. Sawinski. Appreciate that. And then just members of the public should rest assured that public safety issues are top of mind with the board on these projects, and will continue to be going forward. Ms. Sutton, any other folks who have asked to be recognized?
Yes, there's one last hand up for now. Well, no, there's two. Lori?
Yes, hello. Is the unmuted?
Yes, Laurie, you are unmuted. Wouldn't you mind identifying yourself and your address, please, for the record?
Yes, thank you. I'm Laurie McIntosh. I live at 77 Cushing Road, and I would like to, there's many points tonight that that deserve attention, but Dwayne did a great job talking about safety. I'd like to talk about the traffic. I am going to read directly from the notes or the email that I sent to the Board of Appeals. It is posted on the website, but perhaps the developers have not had a chance to read it.
Ms. McIntosh, I'd ask you not to do that. The board has read your email.
Okay, let me make comments.
Yes, please. If you could summarize, rest assured that everybody on the board reads everything that comes in.
No, I wasn't going to read the whole
we
email.
have no life, so we read all the stuff. So
yeah,
please, if you would summarize it in your own words, that would be most appreciated.
Yes. So regarding the traffic that was estimated, I would first like to say that an actual traffic study that was done over 2 weeks of data was done by the Traffic Committee of Milton back in 2015 on Cushing Road. And so to find out how many cars there are per day, at least back then, and it hasn't changed that much, I would like to direct everyone to that study. Secondly, I did some research and found statistics online, and I can't obviously read the web links, but if you go to the comment section, you'll see them at the bottom of the comments. The average household trips per day is 10 per household. And so going and returning is 20 cars going up and going in and out per day. Despite what the developing team has mentioned about where the most traffic is going, once again in this meeting, just like the last meeting, they completely ignored Cushing Road. Since we are practically immediately at the base of this location, most of the traffic is going to be coming up and down Cushing Road, because we are the fastest way to get to the grocery store, the liquor store, the bank, the post office, the train, further into Boston, to Dedham, and to Route 1. So rather than the intersection with Dana and the intersection with Wolcott, or whichever the other place is, they ought to be looking at the intersection at Cushing Road. And with this statistic of 20 car passes per day, that works out to 400 additional car rides per day, the overwhelming majority of which is going to be up and down Cushing Road. That turns into a non-resident car every 2 minutes up and down our street. That doesn't even include, as we mentioned earlier, Amazon, UPS, Uber Eats, the Globe Delivery, et cetera, et cetera. The traffic is going to be multiplied geometrically. In addition, I would like to
Ms.
mention
McIntosh,
that.
could I just stop you there for 1 second?
Yeah.
And I do have your, I do have your comments up, and I see the link, and rest assured, we'll take a look at that. But
Yeah.
I just want to, and please don't take this the wrong way, but do you have are you a traffic engineer? Do you have expertise in traffic issues or anything like that that you'd like to bring to the board's attention?
No, I'm a web developer actually, and I work out of my home. And so as I look out my window, which is where I'm sitting right now, I see every car that goes by.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just wanted to have that clarification. Please
Sure,
proceed.
I'm very aware of it because I look at them all day long. The last thing I wanted to mention was that the architect, who I believe was hired by the town as a peer review, Cliff Boner, who was on the call the last time, the last comment that he made was that he would like to see a complete redesign for the many reasons that have been discussed tonight: safety, traffic, et cetera, et cetera. But when the chart went up on the screen, it didn't look like that had been done. So I'm just wondering, are his comments being taken under advisement? Is that going to happen?
I don't want to speak for the applicant. I will simply say that the board is aware that there are discussions underway, and there could potentially be changes, but the board is unaware what specific changes there may be. I see Mr. Schomer has taken himself on mute. Mr. Schomer, is there anything you'd like to add to that, my particular statement?
Just to say that the changes that Mr. Bomer recommended are under advisement at this point. It just for logistics and practical purposes, it takes a fair amount of time to turn around changes of that extent, because you have to investigate feasibility and whether there are site issues and grading issues and things of that nature. So we're looking into it actively, and we're considering options on that. But the plans have not been updated at this point because we haven't reached a final answer on it yet.
Thank you, Mr. Schomer. So, Ms. McIntosh, do you have any additional comments?
That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McIntosh. Appreciate that. Ms. Sutton, are there any other persons who have asked to be recognized?
Yes, we have 3 more. We have Amanda, Stephanie, and okay, Mr. Day took his hand down. So Amanda?
Hi, thank you. I'm Amanda Serio and I live at 905 Brush Hill Road. And I
I'm sorry,
apologize.
Amanda, I had a little glitch in my system. What did you say, 95 Brush Hill Road?
995.
Thank you.
Yep. And I apologize, I wasn't able to hop on earlier in the meeting, so I didn't get all of the details that were shared. I just wanted to, one of the many things that I have concerns about with this building that I know that you guys have heard many of them. The thing that, one of the big things that just keeps coming back to me is the understanding that these properties are intended to be in areas that are commuter areas. And as somebody who was commuting into Boston for a long time and commuting from the Reedville station, the idea of walking to the train station is comical. I used to try to do it. I tried to do it a few times, but Brush Hill Road is just so dangerous to walk on. I know that Dwayne mentioned walking, and there are several of us who try, but I can tell you that they're very strategic on the time of day that you would walk on this road. It's just because there's no sidewalk, all of the things that you've probably seen, there's no sidewalk, the speed of the cars, the number of people that just fly down, the number of times I've been passed on a double lane. I just don't think that anybody has really done the walk to any mass transit to recognize that that's really not viable. It's not something that anybody would do. The other piece is that this is a road that every time my son gets on his bike and drives up the road, I have fingers crossed and say a little prayer, because it's terrifying to not only walk on the road, but to have your kids walk on this road or bike on this road. Any of us who have had our kids have to go out and wait at the bus stop, particularly in the winter mornings where it's dark. It's treacherous, and there's always the calls into Milton schools to see if we can change bus stop locations in order to make sure that our kids are safe and that they're not having to cross Brush Hill or be at any corner. So, I know that's just one minor point of many that many of us could make. It's just a really disheartening project, to be honest with you. We already deal with all of the traffic in and out from Curry College, and I have every college student delivering their Uber Eats to my house. So I'm already familiar with how frequently Uber Eats is on our street, and Amazon. I get everybody's packages from there as well. So, adding more traffic to that is concerning, as I said, but really I just think this thought process that this is a neighborhood that is easily manageable for somebody who is walking is that contention is made by somebody who has never walked in this neighborhood. So, as I said, I have many other concerns about it. I will send a letter in, and this isn't the time for it, but I just think that that's an issue that needs to be continually raised, is the dangerousness of this street and that it is not a walkable commuting location.
Thank you, Ms. Serio, and I would encourage you to, if you are so desirous, to put something on the record. We, as I said to the previous speaker, we do read everything, and we'll take your comments into consideration. Thank you for participating.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Ms. Sutton, we have another person who has not spoken before who has raised their hand.
We do. We have Stefan, and I do want to say that Dwayne Day has risen his hand again.
Just for if you would move Stefan to the point where he can speak, I would just let Mr. Day know that he has already spoken. We're going to let folks who haven't had a chance to speak, and then I'll get back to Mr. Day.
Well,
So,
sir, I just want to,
as a courtesy.
it's not me, it's my wife.
It's Carol Day who would like to say something after Mr. Stefan.
Thank you. My apologies. So, you know what, as a makeup, Mrs. Day, Mr. Burnett, I'm going to ask you to hold for just a minute. And my apologies for making an assumption. So Mrs. Day, go ahead.
That is quite all right. Once again, my name is Carol, not once again, but my name is Carol Day, 53 Cushing Road. And I just want to let everyone know there that we are the study. The people you're talking about are the people who live in this neighborhood. And I will give you and let you know that I commute daily. Prior to the pandemic, I was commuting daily, and that's going to reoccur. But in my experience commuting daily, I have tried walking. That doesn't work. But by the time you get off of work and come home at night, it's too dark to walk it safely. In addition to that, driving, there is a major bottleneck at the end of Brush Hill Road because of the traffic trying to either come into the commuter rail or leave from the commuter rail. And most of the time, the traffic is so thick. So a 2-minute drive turns into 20 minutes, 15 minutes or more. So all of those things need to be addressed because there is going to be a bottleneck. Your plan looks simple on paper, but it's not real life. And we have to address the real life issues in this neighborhood, not after the development, but before the development. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Day. Appreciate that. Mr. Burnett, thank you for waiting. Thank you for your patience. And please proceed. Just if you wouldn't mind letting me know what your address is so I can.
Yes,
for the
hello.
record.
Can you confirm you can hear me right now?
We can, sir.
You can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Stefan Burnett. I live at 924 Brush Hill, so right next to the project. And I just wanted to point out, agree with everybody who said that simply walking in that area is simply not safe or feasible. And the main thing I want to remind people in that sense is that during the site visit, which was during the daytime, on the weekend, several of the member of the neighbors offered to the board who were visiting to walk to the train station to just get an experience for the feel of walking in that area. And at that point, you decided, and I quote directly, that you felt you didn't want to expose the board member to that risk. And so, I mean, that seemed to be in full agreement that the walking in that area is simply not feasible, not safe. It's no longer the neighbors talking. In that case, it was a board member. And that's all I have to say for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Appreciate that. Any other comments? Anybody else have a raised hand, Beverly?
No one.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your comments and whatnot. We appreciate that. Mr. Sawinski, I think we've come, well, actually, before Mr. Sawinski, let me turn it over to the members of the board for a second to see if they have any questions or comments that they'd like to add before I ask Mr. Sawinski and we talk a little bit about scheduling. Mr. Gray, Mr. Mullen, anything you'd like to add at this point?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right. Mr. Sawinski. Grace us with
Thank you,
your wisdom.
Mr. No, I wouldn't go as far as to say that. Just looking at a calendar. So I think we are next scheduled for March 30th. I think we've been trying to be on an every 3-week schedule. And so I just want to just make sure we just have a chance to have the conversation. So we'll need to hear from Sean Reardon with his peer review comments, correct?
Correct.
And I guess one thing that I would then kind of ask of the applicant is, you know, based on the conversations that happened at the last hearing, based on the conversations that happened at the working session, is there going to be additional materials reflecting any site change? I guess I just want to make sure that we've got that lined up if we're expecting it to be lined up, or if we're going to wait and see what Mr. Reardon comes back with.
Did we lose Mr. Schumer?
Question for us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tamposi.
Great. Yeah, no, Jesse had to jump off. You know, what I can say is, you know, sort of just echo what Jesse said is where, you know, we had a good session at the working session with Mr. Bomer, Mr. Reardon, where, you know, based on that session, we're looking at some of the options that they suggested and, you know, determining the feasibility. Unfortunately, you know, that takes some time, and, you know, our team's working hard, and, you know, we have to just make sure, you know, that we understand each of those options, understand the pros and cons, and you know, we're working on that now. So, you know, at this point, I don't have a, you know, definitive answer, but I can say that, you know, we're looking at those, and, you know, once we've decided on a, you know, particular direction, we'll certainly provide that information to the board, you know, as soon as we have it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense to me, and it's fine. I just want to, you know, it's less a question or sort of directive or anything, and more just kind of setting expectations for what we want to talk about. You know, the other question, and I think we can kind of further address this at the next hearing, you know, and perhaps the development team will be further along in their thinking on whether they're sort of starting to come up with some solutions to some of the issues that have already been raised. You know, and that relates to Mr. O'Brien. You spoke earlier about having sort of a town night. You know, there are certain components of this project that I think are kind of evergreen for town staff. You know, regardless of what the actual site plan turns out to be. You know, we'll have, you know, some kind of general purpose comments. But I do want to kind of make sure that, you know, I'd rather us comment on what looks to be, you know, a final project. I think a lot of the technical aspects that are driving site changes relative to life safety, which again, Chief Madden will be involved with, you know, every step of the way. Stormwater design, you know, these are all things that a lot of town staff folks, myself, the DPW director, other folks, kind of are leaning on the peer review on. It's kind of why, you know, one of the reasons why the peer reviewers are engaged. You know, so that's not to sort of say like anything except that, you know, let's kind of see where we are after next hearing, and I can certainly line up anyone that the board wants to hear from the town. But just to kind of, you know, reiterate, you know, our desire to kind of be, you know, making comments on as final a site plan as possible, because I think, you know, the comments that we have are not going to be the types of comments that are going to drive, you know, changes to the plan. They're going to be, you know, responses to what, you know, actually kind of comes out of the wash as relates to the peer review. So that's all.
Mr. Sawinski, do you and Ms. Barrett anticipate further work sessions with the applicant?
That's up to you. I think, you know, we organize these things at the request of the board. If they've got some goal that, you know, you'd like them to accomplish. I think at this stage, it's probably best to hold off on another session unless, you know, I would defer to the applicant if they think it would be useful to have, you know, additional access to Mr. Reardon and Mr. Bomer. But otherwise, I think, you know, I'd like to wait and see, you know, what Sean comes up with and what the response to Sean's comments are.
Right.
That was my sense as well, but I just wanted to get that on the record. I would assume that would be the sense of my fellow board members as well. So I think for the next one, you know, we'd like to have Mr. Reardon. I think that there will be some additional items as well. Mr. Tamposi, if you wouldn't mind reminding Mr. Schomer that we're going to need some information on trash, or at least the beginning of additional information on trash management, things like that. We still have a lighting plan that is out there, and obviously, if there are substantial changes to the project, the lighting plan, but that's still out there as well. Any of the board members have any additional items that should be on the shopping list, the homework list, Mr. Gray?
Oh, no, not that I can think of at the moment.
Okay, Mr. Mullen, you all set? All right. So with that, and Mr. Galvin, I'm going to give you one last chance. Do you have anything you'd like to add at this particular point in time?
Nothing further to add at this point.
Okay. With that, I'm going to bring this hearing to a close, and I want to thank everyone for your participation. Appreciate the robust citizen participation in this hearing as well. Mr. Dumais, appreciate your being with us today. Thank you for your expertise. And thanks, everyone. I will now recess this hearing until March 30th at 7 p.m. in the evening. Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank you. Good night.